method?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely, and a medium, right? So of course now,
Yeah.
you see people like this, right? With devices, little ones relatively, and you can think of all the things that are changing. But I mean, what he was talking about here was Plato. Plato was not happy with writing. He actually critiqued writing, and yet he's the philosopher that writes so much, right? But he's actually critical of writing because writing is going to mean we won't have to memorize things anymore. And for Plato, being able to memorize the Iliad, that was, as he was growing up, that was the education of the best, was to be able to do that. And what was happening is as people were starting to write and then able to read and not have to remember it because they could go to the text and read it, that was going to deteriorate our abilities in the same way that you've probably heard lots of people criticizing young people are not going to read books, which I think is actually statistically true. I mean, you certainly find people that are reading books today, but I think statistically how many books a person of a certain age group reads per year, I think is statistically quite lower. And everyone points out, well, the distractions of the internet and these devices is changing our attention, or it's distracting us from the kind of reading that we have with books and so on. And at this point, it was kind of interesting because the poets didn't have any special organization over what different concepts meant. And so Plato, in doing what Eric describes in this book, which is in the library, by the way, and it's not that big a book, actually, concludes that Plato starts asking questions. What do these words mean? And if you think about it, all of the dialogues of Plato are based on a conception of the idea of that dialogue. So, for example, one of them, let's pick one. Well, Timaeus, we could do. Let's say Euthyphro, for example. The Euthyphro is considered a really important dialogue. Euthyphro is the character that Socrates is arguing with in the Euthyphro. And EU means good in Greek, Theo means God, and Phro is phronesis. So basically, Euthyphro means good God analysis. He's a priest. He's a specialist on the gods. And in this dialogue, Socrates is waiting in line to go on trial, which will be the apology, which is Apollo. And Apollo is the demon in his ear that he hears that says, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So in a sense, the apology is Apollo's fault, right? And we still give apologies. When we say an apology, we mean the reason this happened, right? And Apollo is the god of reason, and et cetera, et cetera. But so Euthyphro is a person who understands the gods, and Socrates is going to be put on trial because he's been impious. He's leading the kids astray by teaching them critical thinking. And what do they do once they learn from him is they ask questions of their authorities, and they're critical of their authorities. And at the time, that was just, no, you don't do that, right? So Socrates is on his way to being tried for impiety. So he asks Euthyphro, how do I be pious? And Euthyphro being, a good God analysis, individual, is going to teach Socrates how to be pious. And so they asked the definition. What does it mean to be pious? And of course they have difficulty here. Euthyphro has trouble because he says being pious is doing what the gods love. That's how you're pious. Well, of course, in the Greek culture at the time, there was a pantheon, a whole world of gods, right? And so basically, Zeus loved doing this thing and that thing, and I won't get into it, but Hera, his wife, hated all of those things, right? So there's a conflict between what the gods love, and as a result, there's a conflict in how you can be pious. I can't be pious to Zeus without being impious to Hera, and if I'm pious to Hera, Zeus will think I'm just a wimp, right? No man at all, if I follow his criticism, right? So Euthyphro is stuck, and Socrates helps him dig the hole deeper, right? And so he says, aha, well, let me frame it this way. Is the pious pious because the gods love it? Or do the gods love the pious because it's so pious? So, on the one frame, Zeus loves this. This is pious to Zeus, so that's how I should be. But Hera loves this, so that's confusing. How can I be pious? I can't be pious to all of them. Or do the gods love the pious because it's pious? In other words, is there a hierarchy of good, which is where Plato's really going, right? A hierarchy of good, and I can use reason in order to analyze what is better behavior and end up then being pious because I, like the gods, are all valuing the good, right? Well, at that point, Euthyphro famously just quits and runs away. It kind of ends the whole argument for him, which is, some will speculate, well, considering why Euthyphro was in line, probably a good idea. But in any case, that's the end of that dialogue. And the assumption is this puts paid to the argument that the priesthood class knows what the good is. And you should just listen to them. Instead, what we should do is listen to reason and try to reason out what the good is, right? And it's difficult, Socrates doesn't succeed in doing it. But so what's happening is with Plato, who's switched now to prose instead of poetry, and you could, if you read enough poetry, you'll see that the way that things are presented, you don't really need definitions of things. It's the context that gives you the meaning through poetry. But once you get into prose, now you need the definition. You have to figure out what the word means. And so Plato is an idealist in the sense that now we have to figure out what these ideas all mean. So definitions begin to be significant. And for Eric Havelock, what prompted this was switching to writing in prose. Now we can go on and we can say, okay, well, when did our writing get double checked? And it seems like the next major step for us was the invention of carbon paper. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not, but you can. It used to be that you could get forms that had carbon paper in between. So normally you could have like maybe up to 3 copies. So if you made a contract or something, you had 3 duplicates of it, which were close enough that you could actually say, oh yes, that's true. But the next major step, I guess you could go into copiers and things of that sort, is the internet. And with the internet and digital communications and computers sending messages, the way they have software that checks what's being sent so that you're making, it checks as it's being sent so that what's received and what's sent is a match, is so beyond our ability to communicate with one another, that we're hopeless when it comes to being able to duplicate exactly what's being sent. So if I were to ask you, what does piety mean? And then give you an answer, it means doing what the gods love. And I'll ask any of you, what do you think? What did I just say? What does that mean?
It means to you, piety means that God means love, and that you can act in a way that would befit that name.
Okay, that's good enough, because what I wanted to show was that none of us in that kind of a situation will reply, you said, and then quote exactly what I said. We always try to rephrase what the person said in different words. That's how we answer that. It would seem cheeky to respond to the person, who said, you said, and then quote them exactly. That would be like, oh, But actually, when you're trying to rephrase what somebody just said, you're not saying the same thing. So we're not able to duplicate at the same level that computers can. So, that being the case.
But that's not super problematic because you're still retaining, it's still possible to retain the meaning even if you change the language.
Well, famously, and this comes, guess who? Ludwig Wittgenstein. What is the meaning of meaning? Which sounds funny, but it's serious. It's a serious question. What do we mean by meaning? I love it when I ask, what's the meaning of whatever, pick a word, and people will go to the dictionary and come and tell me, the dictionary, urbandictionary.com or whatever, says this. And you could tell that their attitude in that response is that, so that's what it means. But the issue, of course, is who gives the dictionary the right to tell us what that word means? And in fact, we know today that words are constantly evolving and changing, and so the meaning is changing. And so a dictionary is trying to fix, so let me enter into this a little bit. It used to be thought that words had a definite meaning, and the dictionary was made by individuals, usually old men with glasses and cigars or pipes, one or the other, who would literally go around and find out what everybody was saying and then sit down in a dark room usually, but enough light that they can type on old Underwood typewriters, a dictionary. And you have the OED, right? The Oxford English Dictionary, which is like the, definite example of, when you buy a copy of that, it comes in a box with a special little drawer with a magnifying glass, because the print is so small, you need the magnifying glass even if your eyesight is good. Right? So that's what meaning used to be, but along comes Ludwig Wittgenstein, and when he realizes that he was wrong in his first book, the Tractatus that we looked at, where you've got 7 main sentences, etc. The world is all that is the case. He's talking about the way we speak of it as if everything could be very absolutely clear in our language, and we're done, right? Here it is. And now you can go home. You don't have to study philosophy anymore. It's a waste of time, right? And as far as he was concerned, the really important stuff we couldn't talk about. Remember, the very last statement of the Tractatus is what you can't talk about, then you have to stay in silence. Wovon man nicht sprechen kann. Shoot, let me see if I can.
this similar to like Zen Taoism, where they're like, you cannot know the world, therefore it's you have to, like,
Darüber
know it
muss
at silence.
man schweigen. I didn't spell it exactly right, but here it. Woran man nicht sprechen kann, darüber muss man schweigen. Mit diesem berühmten Orakelspruch